Hello and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be spending some time in a world of quiet contradictions, a world of silk and sawdust, of laughter and loneliness. We are going to appreciate the strange and often overlooked life of the medieval court jester. This isn't a story of kings and battles, but of the person who was allowed to speak truth to power, as long as he did it with a smile. The one soul in the castle who was both an insider and an outsider, living by his wits alone. In a world where every word could mean life or death, where the social order was as rigid as stone, there lived someone whose very existence was a beautiful paradox. Before we drift back in time, if you enjoy these quiet journeys into the past, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to give this video a like or perhaps subscribe. It helps this little corner of history grow, and it means the world to me. And please, feel free to leave a comment telling us where you're listening from tonight. It always amazes me how many of us are gathered here from different parts of the world, all settling down to the same story, under different stars. From bustling cities to quiet countryside, from snowy winters to warm summer evenings, all of us finding our way to this same moment of peace. It's a wonderful thought. And now, let's begin to settle in. Find that perfect, cozy spot in your bed. Let your head sink deep into the pillow, feeling its softness cradle you. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. Hold it for just a moment. And as you breathe out through your mouth, feel your body begin to melt into the mattress, releasing the day. Let your shoulders drop and soften. Feel your arms become heavy and warm at your sides. Let your legs sink deeper into the bed, completely relaxed. There is nothing to do now, nothing to worry about, nothing to remember, except to listen to the sound of my voice, and let your mind drift like a feather on a gentle breeze. You blink awake, not to an alarm, but to a faint gray light filtering through a high, narrow window. The air is cool against your skin and carries the scent of old stone, wood smoke, and the sweet, musty aroma of straw rushes that cover the floor. You're not in your familiar bed, not in your room. Instead, you find yourself on a simple cot, a rough wool blanket pulled up to your chin. The mattress beneath you is thin, stuffed with straw that rustles softly with each breath you take. You can hear the distant, muffled sounds of a castle beginning to stir in the early dawn, the faint clatter of iron pots from the kitchens far below, the low nicker of a horse in the courtyard, the creak of wooden shutters being opened somewhere in the tower above. You are in the heart of a medieval English castle, sometime in the 14th century. The year might be 1347, or perhaps 1362. Time moves differently here, measured not in minutes but in seasons, in the rise and fall of lords, in the slow turning of the great wheel of fortune. But you are not a knight in shining armor, nor a lord wrapped in velvet and fur, nor even a simple servant with calloused hands. You are something far more peculiar, far more precarious. You are the king's fool, his licensed jester. Your armor is made of wit, your sword is your tongue, your shield is your ability to make the powerful laugh at themselves. Your job is not to fight or to farm, not to pray or to build, but to entertain, to observe, and above all, to survive. You live by your wit alone, and your position is both a privilege and a prison. You dine at the high table, but sleep in a servant's quarters. You speak freely, but must choose every word with the care of a man walking on ice. Today we will walk in your soft-soled shoes, feel the weight of your colorful motley, and understand the quiet, strange, and surprisingly contemplative world of the court jester. A world where wisdom wore the mask of folly, and truth was spoken only in riddles and rhymes. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, woven with threads of nobility and serfdom, of prayer and warfare, of feast and famine, there existed a figure so unique, so paradoxical, that he seemed to belong to no world and every world at once. This was the court jester, the king's fool, a man whose very existence challenged every rule of the rigid social order that defined medieval society. Picture, if you will, the medieval world as a great ladder stretching from earth to heaven. At the bottom, the serfs are bound to the soil like the roots of trees. Above them, the craftsmen and merchants, then the knights, the nobles, the bishops, and finally, At the very top, the king himself, appointed by God to rule. Every person knew their place, knew their role, knew the boundaries they could never cross. And yet, somehow, dancing between these rigid rungs, lived the jester. He was a servant who could dine with kings, a commoner who could speak truths that would cost a noble his head, a man of no family or fortune whose survival depended entirely on his ability to make the most powerful person in the realm laugh until tears streamed down his face. There were two kinds of fools in the medieval world, and understanding this difference is like understanding the difference between a wild flower and a carefully tended rose. The first was what they called the natural fool, often someone born with what we might today call a developmental disability, or perhaps someone whose mind worked in ways that seemed touched by something divine. These souls were treasured for their innocence, their inability to lie or deceive, their pure and childlike observations that could cut straight to the heart of truth. But you are the other kind. You are what they call a licensed fool, a man hired not for what you lacked, but for what you possessed in abundance. Wit, intelligence, the ability to see the world from angles that escaped everyone else. You are a professional entertainer, but more than that, you are a keeper of balance in a world that could tip toward chaos with a single wrong word. Your life unfolds within the stone walls of a castle that is both your stage and your prison. These walls have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the whispered conspiracies of nobles, the tears of queens, the rage of kings. And through it all, you have been there, a constant figure in motley, watching, listening, remembering, and somehow finding ways to transform the tension and fear and boredom of court life into moments of genuine laughter and relief. The medieval court was not the romantic vision we might imagine from storybooks. It was a place of crushing routine and suffocating etiquette, where a single misstep could mean disgrace or death. Lords and ladies lived lives of incredible privilege, but also incredible constraint, bound by rules of behavior so complex that even breathing seemed to require permission. Into this world of whispered conversations and hidden daggers, of alliance and betrayal, of magnificent boredom and terrible excitement, you brought something that was both desperately needed and incredibly dangerous: the gift of laughter. But your laughter was never simple. It was seasoned with wisdom, sharpened with observation, and always carefully measured. You lived in a world where kings could order executions over a perceived slight, where noble families could vanish overnight, where the wrong joke at the wrong moment could transform you from beloved entertainer to dangerous enemy in the space of a heartbeat. And so you learned to walk softly, to speak in riddles, to hide profound truths inside silly rhymes. You became a master of reading faces, of sensing the invisible currents of power that flowed through the castle like underground rivers. You learned when to speak and when to remain silent, when to approach and when to retreat, how to be present without being threatening, how to be wise without being presumptuous. Tonight, as you settle deeper into sleep, we will explore this strange existence together. We will feel the weight of your fool's cap with its tinkling bells, the softness of your pointed shoes, the colorful patches of your motley costume. We will walk the stone corridors of the castle, sit by fires that have been cold for 700 years, and listen to conversations in a language that has evolved and changed beyond recognition. Most of all, we will understand that beneath the bright colors and silly jokes, beneath the juggling and the jests, lived a human being of remarkable complexity and quiet courage. A man who found a way to speak truth in a world that punished honesty, who brought light to dark places, who survived by making others happy while often living in loneliness himself. This is his story. This is your story. And as the medieval world slowly unfolds around you like a tapestry being unrolled by gentle hands, you can let yourself sink deeper into rest, knowing that you are about to discover a life unlike any other, in a time unlike any other, lived by a person who was, in his own quiet way, unlike anyone else who ever lived. The story is about to begin. Before the day truly begins, you must dress for it. But your clothes are not armor, nor are they the simple tunics of the servants. Yours is a uniform of bells and soft colors, a costume that speaks before you even open your mouth. You reach for the garment that lies folded at the foot of your cot, your motley. The word itself is old, meaning mixed or varied. And that is exactly what this strange outfit is. The fabric feels soft beneath your fingers, worn smooth by countless days of wear. It is not one color, but many patches of deep forest green sewn next to bright golden yellow, royal blue beside warm rust red. Each piece of cloth tells its own story. Some fine silk gifted by a pleased lord, others simple wool traded from a traveling merchant. The sleeves are different lengths, one short, one long, not by accident but by design. Nothing about your appearance should be ordinary. Nothing should let the eye rest too comfortably. You are meant to be a walking contradiction, a living riddle that makes people smile before they even know why. As you pull the motley over your head, you feel the familiar weight of the small brass bells sewn along the seams. They are not loud, clanging things, but delicate chimes that whisper rather than shout. With each movement, they create a soft, musical accompaniment to your steps, a gentle warning of your approach, or perhaps a promise of entertainment to come. Next come the hose, your stockings, each leg a different color. Today, one is striped in green and white, the other is a solid deep purple. Your legs will look like they belong to two different people, and that too is intentional. You are a creature of parts that don't quite match, a puzzle that can never be completely solved. But perhaps the most distinctive part of your costume are the shoes. They are not the sturdy leather boots of a knight or the simple, practical slippers of a servant. Your shoes are soft-soled and curled at the toe, curving upward like the horns of a ram or the tendrils of a vine reaching toward the sun. They are dyed a brilliant scarlet, and at the very tip of each curl, a tiny silver bell dangles, singing softly with every step you take. The shoes force you to walk differently from other men. You cannot stride boldly or march with purpose. Instead, you must move with a kind of dancing gait, lifting your feet higher, placing them more carefully. Even your walk becomes part of your performance, part of the gentle spectacle that is your life. Finally, you reach for your most important tool, your merit. It is a fool's scepter, but not grand or jeweled like a king's staff of office. Your merit is carved from a single piece of pale ash wood, smooth and light in your hand. At its top sits a miniature head, carved with exquisite detail to look exactly like your own face. The tiny eyes are painted with the same mischievous twinkle you hope to see in the mirror, the mouth curved in a perpetual, knowing smile. The little head wears its own tiny cap, complete with bells so small they are barely larger than dewdrops. When you shake the staff gently, they create a sound like distant rain on leaves, soft, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The merit is your companion, your alter ego, the part of yourself that can say things you might not dare to speak aloud. When you hold conversations with the carved head, pretending it disagrees with you or offers its own jest, you can express dangerous thoughts safely, hiding them behind the pretense of a puppet's words. Around your neck, you fasten a collar of soft leather, dyed to match the motley's many colors. It bears no coat of arms, no symbol of noble house or ancient lineage. Instead, it is decorated with tiny mirrors, each no larger than a coin, that catch and scatter the light as you move. You are not a knight reflecting the glory of his lord, but a jester reflecting back the court's own image. Sometimes clear, sometimes distorted, always revealing something unexpected. Last of all comes your cap, the fool's hood that marks you more clearly than any other piece of your costume. It is soft and pointed, made of the same patchwork motley as your tunic, and it ends in long, floppy points that hang down past your shoulders. Each point is tipped with a bell, and when you turn your head quickly, they dance and chime like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The hood frames your face, drawing attention to your expressions, making every raised eyebrow or crooked smile part of the performance. As you settle the cap on your head and feel its familiar, comfortable weight, you catch sight of yourself in the small, polished metal mirror that hangs on your wall. The reflection that stares back is both you and not you, a creature of whimsy and wisdom, of bright colors and shadowed truths. You are ready now to face the day, armed not with sword or shield, but with bells and smiles and the ancient, powerful magic of laughter. Your fingers brush over the motley one final time, feeling the soft, worn spots where countless performances have left their mark. This costume is more than clothing. It is your armor, your mask, your license to speak truths that others dare not voice. In these patches of color and whispers of bells, you find both your freedom and your cage. Dressed in your strange attire, you are now ready to walk the castle halls, your soft steps making no sound, save for the gentle, occasional jingle of a bell. Your footsteps lead you away from your small cot, through a quiet, stone corridor. Unlike the knights who sleep in the barracks or the servants in the lofts, your place is different. You walk slowly, the soft bells on your shoes whispering against the cold stone floor, each step echoing faintly in the narrow passageway that connects your chamber to the heart of the castle. The corridor is lit by a single torch, its flame dancing in the draught that seems to live permanently in these old walls. The light flickers across the rough-hewn stones, casting moving shadows that dance alongside you like silent companions. The air here smells of age and permanence, old stone, burned wood, and the faint mustiness of tapestries that have hung in the same place for generations. Your chamber lies in a peculiar part of the castle, neither in the grand solar where the lord and his family sleep, nor in the bustling quarters where the servants rest after their long days. You are housed in what might once have been a small storage room, transformed into a living space by the addition of your simple cot, a wooden chest for your few belongings, and a narrow window that looks out over the castle courtyard. But the location is no accident. Your room sits directly beneath the Lord's private chambers, close enough that you could hear his footsteps on the floor above if you listened carefully. Close enough that he could summon you at any hour of the day or night, should he need your particular brand of comfort or distraction. Close enough to matter, but not so close as to suggest you truly belong among the nobility. This proximity is both a privilege and a burden. You are trusted with this nearness to power, granted access to the most private parts of the castle where common servants would never be allowed to linger. Yet this trust comes with its own isolation. You are too close to the nobles to find easy friendship among the servants, but too far below the nobles to ever be truly one of them. As you continue down the corridor, you pass the heavy oak door that leads to the Lord's solar. Behind it, you can hear the soft murmur of voices, the Lord and his lady, perhaps discussing the day's business or the evening's entertainment. They speak in low tones, their words indistinct but their rhythms familiar. You have learned to read these rhythms like a shepherd reads the sky for weather. A sharp rise in tone might mean frustration that will need soothing. A long pause might indicate boredom that will require your attention. The corridor opens into a small antechamber, a space that serves as a buffer between the Lord's private rooms and the more public areas of the castle. Here, a few chairs sit arranged around a modest fireplace, and it is here that you often find yourself during the quiet hours of the day. This is your unofficial court, your kingdom within the kingdom, where you hold audiences with visiting dignitaries who wish to speak with you before facing the Lord, or where you practice new jests on sympathetic ears. The fire in this small hearth is always kept burning, tended by a young servant girl who has grown fond of your gentle ways. She leaves small gifts for you sometimes, a particularly fine apple from the kitchens, or a wildflower picked from the castle garden. These tiny tokens of affection are precious to you, reminders that your strange position in the castle hierarchy hasn't completely separated you from human warmth. You settle into your favorite chair, a worn piece of furniture that has molded itself to your shape over countless hours of sitting. The leather is soft and cracked with age, and the arms are worn smooth by your hands. From here, you can see through the narrow window into the courtyard below, where the daily life of the castle plays out like a slowly unfolding story. The view from your window is like a map of the castle's heart. You can see the well where the servants draw water, the stable where the horses stamp and whinny, and the kitchen garden where herbs grow in neat rows. You can observe the comings and goings of merchants and messengers, the training of young pages in the art of swordplay, and the quiet conversations between maids hanging laundry in the morning sun. This watching, this constant observation, has become second nature to you. You notice which servants walk with their heads down, and which hold themselves proudly. You see which knights favor their left leg after old battle wounds, and which ladies in waiting exchange meaningful glances across the courtyard. Every detail is potentially useful, every small drama a source of future entertainment. The walls of your small antechamber are bare save for a single tapestry, a gift from a grateful lord whose melancholy you once lifted with a particularly clever riddle. It depicts a garden, scene with birds and flowers woven in soft blues and greens. Sometimes, when the castle grows too oppressive, you stare at this tapestry and imagine yourself walking in that eternal garden, where the birds never stop singing and the flowers never fade. Your wooden chest sits beneath the window, holding your few personal possessions. A spare set of bells for when the ones on your costume grow dull. A small collection of riddles and jokes, carefully written on scraps of parchment so you won't forget them. A wooden flute that you play sometimes in the quiet hours, its soft notes echoing through the stone corridors like the voice of a lonely bird. But perhaps the most important thing in this small space is the silence it offers. Here, between the public performance of your daily duties and the private retreat of your sleeping chamber, you can simply exist. You can remove your fool's cap and let your hair fall naturally. You can sit without worrying about whether your posture is amusing enough, whether your expression is inviting the right kind of attention. This is where you come to remember who you are beneath the motley and the bells. Not the king's fool, not the licensed entertainer, but simply a man who has chosen to live by his wits in a world that values strength and birth above cleverness and observation. The fire crackles softly in the hearth, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, you can hear the castle beginning to stir more fully as the morning advances. Soon, you will need to leave this quiet sanctuary and take up your public role once again. But for now, you can simply sit and listen to the gentle sounds of the castle awakening around you. From this quiet corner of the castle, you can hear everything. And listening, is the most important part of your job. The great hall is beginning to fill with the morning rush, but your role is not to rush. It is to find a quiet corner, perhaps on a stool near the great hearth, and simply watch. You move through the hall like a gentle ghost, your soft-soled shoes making no sound on the worn stones, your colorful motley a splash of brightness against the gray walls. Yet somehow you remain nearly invisible to those absorbed in their morning routines. You settle onto your usual perch, a low, three-legged stool that sits in the shadow of the great fireplace. The massive hearth dominates one entire wall of the hall, its opening tall enough for a man to stand upright within it. Even now, in the growing warmth of the morning, a small fire burns there, taking the chill from the stone walls and casting a circle of golden light that barely reaches your quiet corner. From here, you can see everything while appearing to see nothing at all. Your eyes, though bright with intelligence, seem to gaze dreamily into the middle distance, as if you're contemplating some private jest or following the path of dust motes dancing in the morning light. But in truth, you are cataloging every detail, every gesture, every fleeting expression that crosses the faces of those around you. Lord Edmund enters first, as he always does, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence long before he appears in the doorway. You note immediately that he favors his right leg this morning, the old wound from the Scottish campaign troubling him again. His jaw is set in that particular way that means he slept poorly, and the way he rubs his temple suggests the wine from last night's feast has left its usual gift behind. These are the small signs that others miss, but you collect them like a merchant collecting coins. Lady Catherine follows a few paces behind, and you observe the careful distance she maintains between herself and her husband. Her smile is perfectly composed, but you see how her fingers worry at the golden ring on her thumb. A gesture you've learned means she's anxious about something. Her ladies-in-waiting cluster around her like colorful birds, their chatter bright and meaningless. But you notice how Lady Margaret's eyes keep darting toward the door, as if she's expecting someone, and how Lady Anne's laughter seems forced, lacking the genuine warmth it held just days ago. The servants begin to arrange the trestle tables for the morning meal, and you watch their choreography with the eye of a man who understands that every movement tells a story. Old Thomas, the head server, moves with his usual dignity, but you see the slight tremor in his hands as he places the wooden trenchers. Mary, the kitchen maid, hurries past with a platter of bread, her cheeks flushed not from the heat of the ovens, but from the presence of young William, the stable boy, who has found an excuse to linger near the hall's entrance. These are the small dramas that unfold every day, invisible to those who participate in them, but clear as illuminated manuscripts to eyes that have learned to read the secret language of human nature. You store each observation carefully, knowing that today's nervous glance might become tomorrow's gentle tease, that this morning's worried frown might provide the key to lifting this afternoon's melancholy. Sir Geoffrey strides in with his usual swagger, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt, his chest puffed with the pride of a man who has never met a mirror he didn't like. But you notice how his eyes avoid those of Sir Robert, who enters moments later, and you remember the whispered argument you overheard yesterday about the boundaries of their respective lands. The tension between them is like a taut bowstring, invisible to most but humming with potential energy that only you seem to hear. The younger members of the court provide their own entertainment. Lady Eleanor, barely 16 and new to court life, tries desperately to imitate the older lady's poise, but her gestures are too studied, her smile too eager. She reminds you of a young bird trying to learn the songs of its elders, all enthusiasm and little skill. Young Lord Peter, heir to a neighboring estate, cannot seem to stop stealing glances at Eleanor, his infatuation so obvious it's almost endearing. You make a mental note. There might be gentle humor to be found in the awkwardness of young love, carefully done so as not to wound tender feelings. Father Benedict enters, his brown robes rustling softly as he makes his way to his usual place at the high table. He moves with the measured pace of a man at peace with his world, but you notice how his fingers worry at his wooden prayer beads, and how his eyes seem shadowed with some private concern. Even men of God, you've learned, carry burdens that humor might help lighten. As the hall fills with the sounds of preparation and quiet conversation, you continue your silent inventory. You note which servants seem tired, which nobles appear troubled, which relationships have subtly shifted since yesterday. The castle's social web is as complex as any tapestry, with threads of friendship, rivalry, love, and ambition all woven together in patterns that change as constantly as the light filtering through the high windows. A page hurries past, his arms full of rolled parchments, and you see how he takes care to avoid catching Sir Geoffrey's eye. Yesterday's scolding still stings, you realize, and you file this information away alongside everything else. Sometimes the best jokes are the ones that gently deflate the pride of those who forget that even pages deserve courtesy. The castle's hunting hounds wander into the hall, their claws clicking softly on the stone floor as they search for dropped scraps. You watch how they navigate the human landscape, noting which people they approach eagerly and which they avoid. Animals, you've found, are often better judges of character than their human counterparts, and their preferences can reveal much about the true nature of those around them. As the morning light grows stronger, streaming through the narrow windows high in the walls, you begin to see the patterns emerging from the chaos of activity. Lord Edmund's poor mood will need careful handling. Perhaps a riddle that requires thought but leads to a satisfying conclusion. Lady Catherine's anxiety might be soothed with a gentle jest that reminds her of happier times. The young lovers might benefit from a story that celebrates the beauty of romance while gently mocking its more ridiculous aspects. All of this information swirls in your mind like leaves in an autumn wind, gradually settling into the careful categories that will shape your performance throughout the day. You are not just an entertainer, but a student of human nature, a collector of small truths that most people are too busy to notice. The art of observation, you've learned, is not about watching everything, but about knowing what to watch. It's about reading the language written in the angle of a shoulder, the pause before a laugh, the way someone's eyes light up or dim when a particular name is mentioned. It's about understanding that every person in this hall is living their own story, complete with hopes and fears, joys, and sorrows, and that your job is to weave these individual stories into a larger tapestry of shared laughter and comfort. As you watch the subtle dramas unfold, you store them away like a squirrel hoarding nuts for winter. You never know when a small, observed detail will become the perfect jest. The trestle tables are being laden with the morning meal. The air fills with the smell of baking bread and roasting meats. You take your seat, not with the nobles, but close enough to hear them. Your place is a curious one. A small stool that has been positioned at the very edge of the high table, close enough to be considered part of the Lord's circle, yet far enough away to remember your station. The great wooden table stretches before you like a landscape of plenty. Fresh rushes have been scattered across its surface, releasing their green scent as the servants place heavy wooden trenchers and clay cups upon them. The bread comes first, great round loaves with crusts the color of autumn leaves, their warmth still rising in gentle spirals of steam. The baker's boy carries them in a wicker basket, and as he passes near you, the aroma fills your senses with promises of comfort and sustenance. You reach for a piece of the bread, feeling its weight in your hands. The crust yields with a satisfying crunch, revealing the soft, pale interior that will soak up the flavors of whatever it accompanies. Medieval bread is not the light, airy thing of later times, but dense and substantial, the kind of bread that fills the belly and provides strength for the day's work. You tear off a small piece and chew it slowly, savoring the nutty flavor of the grain and the faint sweetness that speaks of honey added to the dough. The servants bring pewter pitchers of small ale, the weak, barely fermented brew that serves as the morning drink for all who can afford it. Water, even from the castle's well, is never entirely trusted, but ale that has been boiled in its making is safe for even children to drink. You watch as your cup is filled with the pale golden liquid, noting how the foam clings to the sides like delicate lace. From your position, you can observe the careful ritual of the morning meal. Lord Edmund sits in his great chair at the center of the high table, a piece of furniture that is as much throne as seat. The chair's high back is carved with his family's coat of arms, and its arms are worn smooth by generations of noble hands. He breaks his fast with the deliberate movements of a man who has never known hunger, yet you notice how he barely touches the fine white bread that is his privilege, how his fingers drum restlessly against his cup. Lady Catherine sits to his right, her own chair smaller, but no less elegant. She picks delicately at a piece of soft cheese, her movements precise and controlled. The ladies of the castle have learned to eat like birds, taking small bites and chewing slowly, their conversation flowing around the food rather than through it. You observe how she glances occasionally at her husband, reading his mood in the set of his shoulders, the angle of his head. The morning meal is not the grand feast of evening, but it has its own gentle rhythms and customs. Servants move quietly between the tables, refilling cups and bringing fresh platters. The younger members of the court chatter softly among themselves, their voices blending into a pleasant murmur that speaks of friendship and shared purpose. The older lords and ladies eat in more contemplative silence, their thoughts perhaps already turning to the day's duties and responsibilities. You are served a trencher of your own, a thick slice of day-old bread that serves as both plate and part of the meal. Upon it, the servants place a modest portion of pottage, a thick stew made from whatever vegetables and grains are available in the castle stores. Today's pottage is rich with onions and herbs, thickened with barley, and flavored with just a hint of salt pork. It is simple fare, but nourishing and warm, the kind of food that connects you to the common people of the castle, even as you sit among the nobility. A small cup of honey is placed beside your trencher, golden and thick as liquid sunshine. Honey is precious here, more valuable than sugar, which must be imported at great cost from distant lands. You drizzle a thin stream of it over a piece of bread, watching how it catches the morning light filtering through the high windows. The sweetness explodes on your tongue, a luxury that reminds you of your privileged position, even as it underscores the simplicity of your meal compared to the elaborate dishes being served at the high table. The sounds of the morning meal create a symphony of contentment. The gentle clink of pewter cups against wooden trenchers, the soft murmur of conversation, the rustle of clothing as people reach for shared dishes. Occasionally, one of the castle's cats will slip into the hall, moving silently between the tables in search of dropped morsels. The hounds lie patiently near the high table, their intelligent eyes following every movement, waiting for the scraps that will eventually come their way. As you eat, you continue your careful observation of the court's dynamics. You notice how Sir Geoffrey makes a point of complimenting the ale, though you can see from his expression that he finds it lacking. Lady Margaret keeps glancing toward the hall's entrance, and you remember your earlier observation about her apparent expectation of someone's arrival. Young Lord Peter has managed to position himself where he can see Lady Eleanor, though he pretends to be absorbed in conversation with the gentleman beside him. The meal progresses at a leisurely pace, for there is no urgency in the castle morning. Unlike the common folk who must rise early to tend their fields or practice their trades, the nobility has the luxury of beginning their day gently, with food and conversation, and the gradual assumption of their daily responsibilities. You understand this rhythm well, having learned to match your own energy to the ebb and flow of castle life. Father Benedict says a quiet blessing over his food before eating, his lips moving in silent prayer. The sight reminds you of the deeper currents that run beneath the surface of castle life, the spiritual concerns that govern medieval thought, the awareness of mortality and divine judgment that shapes even the most mundane activities. You make a mental note to remember this when crafting your jests, for humor that ignores the sacred order of things can quickly turn from entertainment to offense. The bread grows heavy in your stomach, the ale warms your blood, and gradually you feel yourself becoming part of the castle's morning rhythm. Your earlier observations begin to take shape, forming the raw material for the day's performance. You can see which members of the court might welcome gentle teasing, which would prefer to be left alone, and which might benefit from a joke that includes them in its humor rather than making them its target. As the meal draws toward its close, you sense the subtle shift in the hall's atmosphere. Conversations become more focused, movements more purposeful. Soon, the morning's duties will begin in earnest. Meetings with stewards, discussions of estate business, the 100 small decisions that keep a medieval castle functioning. But for now, there is still this moment of peaceful community, this shared breaking of the night's fast that binds the castle's inhabitants together in the most basic human ritual. With the meal finished, the day's first true test begins. The king is in a quiet mood, and it is your job to lift the silence gently. You don't begin with a loud noise or a sudden antic. That would be too jarring for the morning. Instead, you begin with a question, a simple riddle passed down from another fool in another court. You rise slowly from your stool, your movements deliberate and unhurried, allowing the soft bells on your costume to announce your intention without startling anyone from their contemplative breakfast mood. "My lord," you say, your voice carrying just far enough to reach the high table without disrupting the gentle conversations at the lower tables. Your tone is warm, almost conversational, as if you're sharing a thought that has just occurred to you rather than launching into a formal performance. "I wonder if you might help me solve a puzzle that has been troubling my poor brain since I woke this morning." Lord Edmund looks up from his trencher, and you can read the subtle signs of his mood in the way his eyebrows lift slightly, the faint relaxation around his eyes that suggests he's willing to be entertained, though he makes no commitment to being amused. Lady Catherine pauses in her delicate picking at the soft cheese, her attention turning toward you with the polite interest of someone grateful for a distraction from the morning's quiet tensions. You take a step closer to the high table, not rushing, but moving with the fluid grace that your strange costume demands. The morning light catches the tiny mirrors on your collar, sending small sparkles dancing across the stone walls like captured starlight. Your merit rests easily in your hand, the carved head at its tip seeming to nod with anticipation. "You see," you continue, your voice taking on the slightly puzzled tone of a man genuinely perplexed. "I dreamed last night of a creature most strange. It has a crown, yet rules no kingdom. It has subjects, yet commands no army. It gives orders, yet speaks no words. And strangest of all, the more it loses its head, the better it serves its master. You pause here, allowing the riddle to settle in the minds of your audience. This is one of the most delicate moments in any jest, the space between the question and the answer, where curiosity builds and minds begin to work. You can see Lord Edmund's fingers pause in their drumming against his cup, can observe the slight forward lean of Lady Catherine's posture that suggests she's engaging with the puzzle. Around the hall, you notice other conversations growing quieter as people strain to hear both the riddle and its eventual solution. Sir Geoffrey is frowning slightly, the expression of a man who prides himself on his cleverness but finds himself stumped. Young Lord Peter has forgotten entirely about stealing glances at Lady Eleanor, his attention caught by the mental challenge you've presented. A crown but no kingdom, Lord Edmund muses aloud, his voice carrying the thoughtful tone of a man who enjoys intellectual exercise. You can see his mood beginning to shift, the morning's melancholy lifting slightly as his mind engages with the puzzle. This is exactly what you hoped for. Not the explosive laughter that might come from a crude joke, but the gentler pleasure of mental stimulation. Indeed, my lord, you nod, allowing a small smile to play at the corners of your mouth. And subjects without an army. What manner of ruler could this be? Lady Margaret ventures a guess from her place at the lower table. A king in a tale, perhaps? Or a figure in a tapestry? Her suggestion is thoughtful, and you acknowledge it with a respectful bow of your head, though your expression suggests she hasn't quite solved the mystery. Father Benedict strokes his chin thoughtfully. Something that loses its head to serve better. Perhaps it speaks of sacrifice? Of service through surrender? His interpretation shows the scholarly mind at work, seeking deeper meaning in what might be simple wordplay. You can feel the energy in the hall shifting, becoming more engaged, more alive. This is the magic you seek to create. Not the empty laughter that comes from mockery or crudeness, but the warm pleasure of shared thinking, of minds working together on a common problem. Even the servants have slowed in their clearing of the tables, lingering to hear the solution. All excellent thoughts, you say, your voice warm with genuine appreciation for their efforts. But let me offer you another clue. This crowned ruler can be found in any castle, yet owns no lands. It serves at the table, yet tastes no food. And when its head is removed, you pause dramatically, raising your merit and miming the action of removal. It pours forth its gifts most generously. The answer dawns on Lord Edmund's face like sunrise, and you can see the exact moment when understanding clicks into place. His expression brightens, and for the first time this morning, you see a genuine smile cross his features. "A wine bottle," he declares, his voice carrying both triumph and amusement. A wine bottle with its crown of wax, its subjects being those who drink from it, giving orders for merriment without speaking and serving best when uncorked. "Precisely, my lord," you exclaim, allowing your own delight to show. You execute a small bow, your bells chiming softly with the movement. Though I would add that, like any good ruler, it brings joy to its subjects and occasionally causes them to lose their own heads as well. The laughter that follows is exactly what you hoped for, not uproarious, but warm and appreciative. Lord Edmund chuckles, a sound of genuine pleasure, and you can see the tension leaving his shoulders. Lady Catherine's laugh is like silver bells, light and musical, and around the hall, others join in with the comfortable laughter of people who have shared in solving a pleasant puzzle. "And here I thought you might speak of a chess piece," says Sir Robert, his contribution showing he, too, has been thinking through the riddle. "The king that commands yet cannot move freely." "Ah, but Sir Robert," you reply with a theatrical flourish, "a chess king gains power by keeping his head, while our wine bottle serves best by losing it entirely. Though both, I grant you, can bring their masters to ruin if not handled with proper wisdom." This draws another round of gentle laughter, and you can see that you've successfully navigated the treacherous waters of morning entertainment. The jest was clever enough to engage their minds, gentle enough not to offend, and inclusive enough to allow others to participate. Most importantly, It has lifted Lord Edmund's dark mood without making him feel that his melancholy was being mocked or dismissed. You sense the perfect moment to withdraw, before the success of one riddle creates pressure for another that might not land as well. I thank you all for helping me solve my puzzle, you say with another small bow. My poor brain feels much relieved, and now I can face the day without that particular worry troubling my thoughts. As you step back from the high table, you catch Lady Catherine's eye and see a small nod of appreciation there. She understands what you've accomplished, the subtle lifting of her husband's mood, the gentle awakening of the hall's energy. These are the victories that matter in your strange profession. Not the loud applause of a crowd, but the quiet gratitude of those whose burdens you've helped lighten. The servants resume their work with renewed energy. The conversations around the hall take on a more animated tone, and you can feel that the day has shifted from melancholy to something more hopeful. The riddle itself was simple, but its effects ripple outward like stones dropped in still water. The king cracks a smile, a small but genuine thing. The air in the hall lights. For now you are safe. Your wit has earned you your keep for another few hours. Later, as the court disperses to its duties, the queen lingers by a window. She turns to you, not as a servant, but as the one person she can speak to without pretense. The morning meal has ended, and the great hall gradually empties as nobles and servants alike move toward their daily responsibilities. Knights stride purposefully toward the practice yard, their spurs ringing against the stone floor. Ladies gather their embroidery and move toward the solar, their voices creating a gentle murmur of conversation. Servants hurry past with trays and pitchers, their movements efficient and practiced. But Lady Catherine remains at the tall, narrow window that looks out over the castle's herb garden. The glass is thick and uneven, distorting the view slightly, but through it you can see the neat rows of mint and thyme, the climbing roses that will bloom magnificently in a few weeks' time. She stands with her hands clasped before her, her posture straight and regal, but there's something in the set of her shoulders that speaks of weariness, of burdens carried in silence. You approach slowly, your soft-soled shoes making no sound on the stone floor. Your bells, which rang so cheerfully during the morning's riddle, now remain silent, as if they too understand that this is a moment for quiet rather than performance. The light from the window catches the threads of silver in your motley, the tiny mirrors on your collar reflecting fragments of the garden's green peace onto the gray stone walls. "My lady," you say softly, your voice carrying none of the theatrical warmth you used during the riddle. This is your other voice, the one reserved for moments when the mask of the fool slips slightly, revealing the observant, compassionate man beneath. The morning grows fair, and the garden promises beauty in the weeks to come. She turns toward you, and for a moment, you see past the careful composure that she wears like armor. Her eyes, usually bright with the energy of managing a large household, seem shadowed with some private concern. The smile she offers you is genuine but weary, the expression of someone grateful for a moment of honest conversation. "Indeed it does," she replies, her voice carrying the cultured tones of nobility, but softer now, more natural. "I was just thinking how the herbs will soon be ready for harvesting. The castle will smell of mint and lavender, and the cooks will have fresh seasonings for their dishes." She pauses, looking back toward the garden. "Simple pleasures, but they matter, don't they?" You nod, understanding that she's speaking of more than herbs and cooking. In the rigid world of medieval nobility, where every word and gesture carries political weight, where marriages are alliances and children are assets, the simple, honest pleasures become precious beyond measure. The smell of mint, the taste of fresh bread, the sound of genuine laughter. These are the things that make life bearable when duty becomes overwhelming. "They do indeed, my lady." You agree, moving to stand beside her at the window, careful to maintain the proper distance while still indicating your willingness to listen. "I've often thought that the smallest joys cast the largest shadows. A sprig of mint can perfume a whole room, just as a moment of genuine pleasure can sweeten a whole day." She glances at you, and you can see her measuring your words, testing whether you truly understand or are merely offering the empty platitudes that courtiers often mistake for wisdom. What she sees in your face must satisfy her, because her posture relaxes slightly, and she looks back toward the garden with a sigh that seems to come from deep within her chest. Sometimes I wonder, she says quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, what it would be like to walk in that garden without thinking of the cost of the seeds, or the wages of the gardeners, or whether the herbs will be sufficient for the winter stores. To simply enjoy them. The confession hangs in the air between you like incense, heavy with meaning. She has revealed something profound about the burden of nobility, the way responsibility can poison even the simplest pleasures. As the lady of the castle, she cannot see a garden without thinking of budgets and supplies, cannot enjoy a meal without considering the cost of the ingredients, cannot even watch her children play without calculating their future marriages and alliances. You consider your response carefully. This is not a moment for jest or riddle, but neither is it a time for heavy philosophy or unwanted advice. What she needs is understanding, acknowledgement of the weight she carries, and perhaps a gentle reminder that even in the midst of great responsibility, small freedoms can still be found. My lady, you say, your voice gentle as a whisper. Perhaps the secret is not in forgetting the cost, but in remembering that some things are worth whatever we pay for them. The mint in your garden serves the castle, yes, but it also serves the morning air with its sweetness, and the bees with its nectar, and your own heart with its simple green beauty. Its greatest service may be the one it provides to no one in particular. She turns to look at you fully now, and you can see something shifting in her expression. Not the lifting of her burdens, but perhaps a slight adjustment in how she carries them. You speak as if you understand such things, she says, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. How does a jester come to know the weight of responsibility? It's a fair question, and one that requires a careful answer. You cannot claim to understand the full burden of nobility, the weight of making decisions that affect hundreds of lives, the constant pressure of political alliances, the loneliness of power. But you do understand something about the cost of always being on, of never being able to simply exist without consideration of how your words and actions affect others. I think, my lady, that anyone who lives by others' pleasure learns something of such weights, you reply thoughtfully. My jests must always serve not just my own amusement, but the mood of the court, the temper of the lord, the needs of the moment. Even my laughter is not entirely my own. Perhaps that is why I've learned to treasure the moments when I can simply stand at a window and admire an herb garden, without needing to make it into entertainment. She nods slowly, understanding passing between you like a bridge built of shared experience. Yes, she says softly. Yes, I think you do understand. She's quiet for a moment, looking out at the garden again, but her silence seems more peaceful now, less burdened. Sometimes, she continues, her voice taking on a slightly wondering tone, I think you fools see more clearly than the rest of us. You stand outside our games of power and precedence, and perhaps that gives you a different view of what truly matters. You shake your head gently, careful not to claim too much wisdom. I think we all see clearly in our own ways, my lady. I see the games because I am not playing them, but you see the consequences because you are responsible for them. Both views are necessary, though neither is complete. She considers this, and you can see her mind working through the implications. You offer comfort without offering false hope, she observes. It's a rare gift. Hope, I've found, is best when it grows naturally from understanding, you reply. False hope withers quickly, but hope that is rooted in truth can survive even the hardest winters. The conversation continues in this gentle vein for a few more minutes, touching on small things. The progress of the garden, the changing seasons, the simple pleasures that persist even in the midst of great responsibility. You offer no solutions to her deeper concerns, because you understand that what she needs is not answers but acknowledgement. Not advice but companionship in the lonely business of carrying burdens that others cannot see. You offer no advice, only a simple, rhyming observation. It is enough. She nods and moves on, leaving you with another secret to keep in the quiet library of your mind. It is a risk you take with every word you speak. Today you misjudged the mood. The joke, meant to be clever, falls into a deep, uncomfortable silence. The afternoon sun streams through the high windows of the great hall, casting long rectangles of golden light across the stone floor. But the warmth seems to have drained from the air around you like water from a broken pitcher. You had read the signs carefully, or so you thought. Lord Edmund had seemed in better spirits after the morning's successful riddle, his shoulders less tense, his conversation more animated during the midday meal. The court had settled into its usual afternoon rhythm. Some nobles engaged in quiet conversation, others attending to correspondence, a few playing chess or backgammon near the great hearth. The atmosphere had felt relaxed, almost drowsy in the way that castle afternoons often do. It was then that you noticed the messenger's arrival. A young man in travel-stained clothes, his face serious with the weight of whatever news he carried. He had been escorted directly to Lord Edmund, and you had watched the brief, whispered conversation that followed. The Lord's expression had darkened slightly as he listened, his jaw tightening in a way that suggested the news was troublesome but not catastrophic. In your experience, such moments often called for gentle humor, a way to acknowledge the tension without dwelling on it, to remind the court that life contains both shadows and light. You had crafted what you thought was a perfect jest, one that would speak to the universal nature of unwelcome news while avoiding any specific reference to the message's contents. Rising from your usual corner, you had approached the high table with your customary careful steps, your bells chiming softly in the afternoon quiet. "My lord," you had begun, your voice carrying the warm, conversational tone that had served you so well that morning. "I've been pondering the curious nature of messengers. They arrive like ravens, all dark urgency and important airs, but unlike ravens, they seem to multiply the more we feed them." You had paused here, expecting the gentle chuckle that usually greeted your observations about the predictable aspects of court life. Instead, you were met with a stillness so complete you could hear the distant sound of horses in the courtyard, the soft whisper of wind through the window frames. Misreading the silence as incomplete understanding rather than disapproval, you had pressed on, committing the cardinal sin of explaining a joke that had already failed. "For you see, my lord, bad news has a way of begetting more bad news, and messengers seem to breed like rabbits in spring, each one bringing word of some fresh difficulty." The words had died in your throat as you registered the expression on Lord Edmund's face. Not the puzzled frown of someone trying to understand humor, but the cold, hard stare of someone who has been deeply offended. His eyes, which had warmed with appreciation during the morning's riddle, now held the flat, dangerous look of a man whose patience has been not merely tested but shattered. The silence stretches now like a taut bowstring, and you can feel every eye in the hall turning toward you. The nobles who had been chatting quietly have fallen silent, their conversations dying mid-sentence. The servants who had been moving about their duties have frozen in place, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere with the instinctive awareness of those who live always on the edge of others' moods. Lady Catherine's face has gone pale, and you see her hands tighten in her lap. She understands, as you are beginning to understand, that the messenger's news was not merely troublesome but devastating. Perhaps word of a military defeat, or the death of an important ally, or news of rebellion in the Lord's territories. Your jest about multiplying bad news has not provided gentle relief, but has instead rubbed salt into a fresh wound. Sir Geoffrey shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his hand moving instinctively toward his sword hilt. Not in threat to you, but in the automatic gesture of a man who has learned to be ready for violence when tensions run high. Young Lord Peter stares at you with wide eyes, as if witnessing a public execution. The ladies in waiting have gone as still as painted figures in a manuscript, their embroidery forgotten in their laps. Father Benedict watches with the grave expression of a man who has seen many falls from grace, his fingers moving silently over his prayer beads. Even the castle's hounds seem to sense the danger, their ears pricked forward, their intelligent eyes moving between you and their master. You feel the weight of your fool's cap like a millstone, the bright colors of your motley suddenly garish and inappropriate. The bells that had announced your approach now seem to mock you with their cheerful sound, a jarring note in the oppressive quiet that has settled over the hall like a shroud. Lord Edmund's voice, when it finally comes, is quiet but carries the unmistakable edge of barely controlled anger. You speak of ravens and rabbits, he says, each word carefully enunciated, as if the affairs of this realm were subjects for barnyard humor, as if the sufferings of my people were fodder for your jest. The words hit you like physical blows, and you feel your stomach drop as you realize the full extent of your mistake. This was not merely a case of poor timing or misread mood. You have violated one of the fundamental rules of your profession. A jester may speak truth to power, but never in a way that diminishes genuine suffering or makes light of real tragedy. You bow your head, the gesture as much an acknowledgement of your error as a sign of submission. My lord, you begin, but he cuts you off with a sharp gesture. You what? He demands, his voice rising slightly. You thought to entertain us with observations about the multiplication of troubles? You saw fit to jest about matters of life and death. His face is flushed with anger, and you can see the pulse beating in his temple. The hall remains frozen in its unnatural quiet, and you realize that your very life might hang in the balance of the next few moments. Lords have been known to strike or even kill jesters who have overstepped their bounds, and while Lord Edmund has always been a fair master, grief and anger can make even good men dangerous. You search desperately for words that might repair the damage, but everything you think to say seems inadequate, potentially making things worse. An apology might sound insincere, an explanation might seem like an excuse, and another attempt at humor would be suicidal. Instead, you remain silent, your head bowed, allowing the weight of your mistake to settle fully on your shoulders. The silence stretches on, broken only by the distant sounds of the castle, the clatter of pots from the kitchens, the call of guards from the walls, the normal sounds of life continuing while your world hangs in the balance. You can feel sweat beating on your forehead despite the coolness of the stone hall, can hear your own heartbeat thundering in your ears. Finally, Lord Edmund speaks again, his voice now deadly quiet. You will leave this hall, he says, and the words fall like stones into still water. You will consider well the difference between wisdom and folly, between service and self-indulgence. When you have learned that difference, you may return. If you have learned it, the dismissal is both merciful and terrifying. You are not to be beaten or imprisoned, but neither are you forgiven. Your position, your very identity, hangs by a thread, and you must somehow find a way to restore what has been broken. You bow deeply, the gesture carrying all the remorse and respect you cannot put into words. My lord, you manage to say, your voice barely above a whisper, I am your humble servant, and I will reflect deeply on your wisdom. As you turn to leave, you feel the weight of every gaze in the hall. Some eyes hold sympathy, others disappointment, a few perhaps even satisfaction at seeing the fool brought low. You walk slowly across the stone floor, your soft shoes making no sound, your bells finally, blessedly silent. The moment passes, but the chill remains. You retreat to your corner, knowing you must be much more careful for the rest of the day. Your place here is not guaranteed. The court is quiet now. The lord is in council, the ladies are at their needlework. For you, these are the empty hours, the long, slow afternoon when the castle settles into its drowsy rhythm like a great stone beast at rest. You find yourself in the solar, where shafts of pale sunlight filter through the tall windows, casting long rectangles of gold across the rushes. The queen and her ladies sit in a circle, their voices a gentle murmur as they work their embroidery. The soft whisper of thread through fabric, the occasional quiet laugh, the rustle of silk, these are the sounds that fill the drowsy air. One of the younger ladies looks up from her work and catches your eye. Fool, she says softly, can you juggle for us? Something gentle, something to pass the time. You nod and reach into your small satchel for 3 simple leather balls, worn smooth by countless afternoons just like this one. You don't leap or shout or make a great show of it. Instead, you begin slowly, letting the balls rise and fall in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. Up and down, the The ladies watch with half-closed eyes, their needles moving in time with your gentle juggling. The rhythm is soothing. Even you feel your eyelids growing heavy as you watch the balls trace their lazy arcs through the dusty sunbeams. This is not the grand performance of the feast hall, but something quieter, something that matches the sleepy pace of the afternoon. After a while, you let the balls come to rest in your palms. The ladies smile and return to their work, and you settle yourself on a cushion by the window. Outside, you can see the castle courtyard, where a few chickens peck lazily at the cobblestones. A stable boy leads a horse across the yard, his footsteps echoing softly off the stone walls. You pull out a small wooden lute, its strings worn thin and gentle. Your fingers find the familiar patterns, and you begin to play. Not a song, really, but just a quiet melody that seems to drift and wander like your thoughts. The music is barely louder than a whisper, just something to fill the spaces between the other soft sounds of the afternoon. The queen looks up from her embroidery and smiles at you. Not the formal smile she wears for visiting lords, but something warmer, more real. You are part of the quiet tapestry of her day, a gentle presence that asks for nothing and gives comfort simply by being there. You play for a while longer, then set the lute aside and simply sit, watching the dust motes dance in the slanted light. This is perhaps the most honest part of your day. These quiet hours when you are not performing, not trying to be clever or amusing. You are simply here in this moment, in this place, part of the castle's sleepy afternoon rhythm. A cat appears from somewhere and settles itself in a patch of sunlight near your feet. It begins to purr, a sound so soft and steady that it seems to make the very air drowsy. You reach down and stroke its fur, feeling the warmth of the sun that has soaked into its coat. Time moves differently in these afternoon hours. Minutes stretch like honey, sweet and slow. The shadows on the floor grow longer, shifting almost imperceptibly as the sun makes its lazy journey across the sky. You could close your eyes and simply listen to the whisper of thread, the soft breathing of the ladies, the distant sound of the wind in the castle towers. Sometimes you doze, your head nodding forward until you catch yourself and sit up straight again. But no one minds. This is the hour for drowsing, for letting the mind wander, for existing in the space between waking and dreaming. You think of nothing in particular, or perhaps everything at once. Memories drift through your mind like clouds across the sky. The taste of this morning's bread. The sound of the king's laughter yesterday. The way the torchlight flickered on the stone walls last night. All of it feels distant and dreamy, like stories someone else might have told you. The afternoon light grows softer, more golden. Somewhere in the castle, a bell chimes the hour, its voice deep and resonant. The sound seems to hang in the air for a long moment before fading away into the stones. You know that soon the afternoon will give way to evening, and with it will come the bustle of preparation for the evening feast. But for now, there is only this, the gentle drowse of a castle afternoon, the soft sounds of peaceful industry, the warm weight of sunlight on your shoulders. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, just for a moment. The cat purrs on. The ladies' voices murmur like a gentle stream. The dust motes continue their slow dance in the golden air. And you, the king's fool, rest in the quiet heart of the day, waiting for whatever comes next with the patience of one who has learned that some of life's greatest gifts come in its quietest moments. As the shadows lengthen in the courtyard, you know the evening feast is approaching, and with it, a different kind of performance. The great hall is transformed by torchlight. The tables groan under the weight of the feast, and your work is now to be everywhere and nowhere at once, a colorful spirit weaving between the long tables like smoke between candle flames. The air is thick with the rich smells of roasted meats and spiced wine. Trenchers of bread hold pools of gravy, and the sweet scent of honey cakes mingles with the earthy smell of ale. The hall buzzes with conversation and laughter, but not the gentle murmur of the afternoon. This is louder, more alive, fueled by wine and the warmth of good food. You move through the hall like a gentle breeze, stopping here and there to share a riddle or a soft jest. At the lower tables, where the castle's men-at-arms sit shoulder to shoulder, you pause to share a simple trick with coins, making silver pieces appear and disappear from behind their ears. They laugh and call for more, but you smile and move on. Your attention must be shared like portions of bread. Near the hearth, a group of visiting merchants has joined the feast. They speak of far-off places, of markets in distant towns where spices come from lands you've never seen. You linger nearby, not to perform, but to listen. Their stories become yours to remember, perhaps to weave into tomorrow's entertainment. A jester's memory is like a basket, always gathering, always storing away small treasures for later use. The high table calls to you with a subtle gesture from the king. He is in good spirits tonight, his cheeks flushed with wine and warmth. The queen sits beside him, elegant in her blue silk gown, her hands moving gracefully as she speaks with a visiting lord's wife. You approach with your usual soft step, your bells making the faintest whisper of sound. "Fool," the king says, his voice carrying easily over the noise of the hall. "Tell us something to make the evening even brighter." You bow slightly, your mind already turning over possibilities like a mill will grinding grain. The mood is jovial but not raucous. The wine has made everyone mellow rather than wild. You choose your words carefully, like a musician choosing notes. "My lord," you begin, your voice pitched to carry just far enough. "I was wondering, what is the difference between a king and a coin?" The king raises an eyebrow, intrigued. The conversation at the high table quiets as others lean in to hear. You pause for just a moment, letting the anticipation build like the breath before a song. A coin is only worth something when it's spent, but a king is worth everything precisely because he cannot be. The king throws back his head and laughs, a rich, genuine sound that ripples out across the hall. Others join in, not because they fully understand the riddle's meaning, but because the king's laughter gives them permission to share in the joy. This is the magic you weave, not just humor, but the creation of shared moments, communal warmth. You move on before the laughter fully dies, knowing that the best jest leaves people wanting more, not less. You drift between the tables like a traveling minstrel, but one who belongs to this place, who knows every face and every mood. At a table near the wall, the castle's young pages sit together, trying to look grown-up as they sip their watered wine. One of them, a boy with bright eyes and straw-colored hair, tugs at your sleeve. "Master Fool," he whispers, "can you teach me a trick?" You smile and crouch down beside him, pulling out a length of rope from your pouch. Not to perform, but to teach. You show him how to tie a simple knot that seems to disappear when pulled, your hands moving slowly, so he can follow. His eyes grow wide with wonder, and you remember being young yourself, amazed by small magics. "Practice this," you tell him quietly, "but remember, the real magic isn't in the trick. It's in the moment of wonder you give to someone else." He nods solemnly, clutching the rope like a treasure, and you ruffle his hair gently before moving on. The evening deepens, and the hall grows warmer from the press of bodies and the heat of the fire. Serving girls move between the tables with pitchers of wine and ale, their faces flushed from the heat and their efforts. You catch the eye of one and mime wiping sweat from your brow, then pretend to fan yourself with an imaginary fan. She giggles despite her tiredness, and in that moment, her burden feels a little lighter. This is your true art, not grand performances or elaborate jests, but these small moments of connection, these tiny gifts of laughter scattered throughout the evening like seeds in a garden. Each smile you create, each moment of levity you bring, helps weave the fabric of the evening into something warm and golden. As the wine flows freely and the noble's laughter grows louder, you slip away. The night is not yet over, and your most important work is often done in the quiet moments between the noise. Long after the hall has emptied, and the servants have cleared the tables, the king remains in his great chair. He beckons you closer, not for a joke, but for silence, and in this quiet hour, you understand that your truest service has nothing to do with laughter at all. The great hall feels vast and hollow now, like the inside of a cathedral after the last prayer has been spoken. The torches have burned low, casting long, wavering shadows that dance across the stone walls. The air still holds the lingering sense of the feast, roasted meat, spiced wine, the smoky sweetness of tallow candles. But underneath it all is the deeper smell of old stone and time itself. The king sits alone at the high table, still in his chair of carved oak and worn velvet. His crown rests on the table beside him, looking smaller somehow in the dim light, just a circle of gold and stones that catches the dying firelight. Without it, he looks older, more tired, the weight of kingship visible in the slump of his shoulders and the lines around his eyes. You approach on silent feet, your soft-soled shoes making no sound on the rush-covered floor. Your bells, too, are quiet now. You learned long ago how to move without their betraying whisper when the moment calls for true stealth. This is not a time for announcement or fanfare. This is a time for shadows and stillness. He doesn't look at you as you draw near, but you know he's aware of your presence. After all these years, the two of you have developed a language that needs no words, a communication of gesture and silence that runs deeper than any jest or riddle. You've learned to read the set of his jaw when he's troubled by news from the northern borders, the way his fingers drum against the arm of his chair when the treasury runs low, the particular stillness that comes over him when he's thinking of his son, fighting in a distant war. "Sit," he says quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not a command but an invitation, and you settle yourself on the floor beside his chair, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from the dying fire, close enough to hear his breathing in the silence. For a long moment, neither of you speaks. The fire crackles softly in the great hearth, sending occasional sparks spiraling up into the darkness of the chimney. Somewhere in the castle's depths, you can hear the faint sounds of the night watch changing, the distant echo of footsteps on stone, the soft closing of a heavy door. But here, in this pool of firelight, there is only peace and the quiet companionship of two souls who have learned to share silence. The king reaches for his cup, not the golden chalice he drinks from during feasts, but a simple pottery mug, worn smooth by countless evenings just like this one. He takes a slow sip of wine, and in the gesture you see not the ruler of a kingdom, but simply a man who is tired and getting older, carrying burdens that no crown can make lighter. "Do you ever wonder," he says finally, his voice so soft you have to lean closer to hear him, "what it would be like to be someone else? Anyone else?" It's not really a question that expects an answer, and you don't give one. Instead, you shift slightly, drawing your knees up to your chest and wrapping your arms around them. In the firelight, your motley looks muted, the bright colors turn to shades of amber and shadow. You look less like a fool and more like what you truly are, a keeper of secrets, a guardian of the quiet moments when powerful men let their masks slip away. "I watched you tonight," the king continues, still gazing into the fire, moving through the hall, making everyone smile. Even the servants, especially the servants. You have a gift, not for jest making, though you do that well enough, but for seeing people, really seeing them, for knowing what they need in any given moment. He pauses, swirling the wine in his cup, watching the liquid catch the firelight. "I envy that. A king. A king is always performing, always being watched, always being what others need him to be. But he rarely gets to simply see, to observe without being observed. You understand. In all your years at court, you've watched him grow from a young man who wore his crown like armor into someone who carries it like a burden. You've seen him make decisions that tore at his heart, smile when he wanted to weep, project strength when he felt hollow inside. And through it all, you've been there, not as an advisor or a courtier with his own agenda, but as something rarer, a witness without judgment, a companion without ambition. My son writes that the campaign goes well, the king says, and you hear the careful neutrality in his voice, the way he's learned to speak of things that terrify him. The enemy retreats. Victory seems certain. He takes another sip of wine. He sounds so young in his letters, so eager to prove himself. I remember that feeling. The fire pops, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney, and for a moment the light flickers brighter, illuminating the king's face. You see the worry there, etched in the lines around his eyes, the way his free hand grips the arm of his chair. This is the burden that weighs heaviest on him. Not the concerns of state or the management of his kingdom, but the simple, terrible love of a father for his child. He writes of glory, the king whispers, but I dream of blood. I see his face on every young knight who rides out from our gates, and I wonder if the crown I'll pass to him will be worth what it costs to wear it. You reach out then, slowly, carefully, and place your hand over his. It's a breach of protocol that could cost a lesser man his life, but you've moved beyond protocol in these quiet hours. Your hand is smaller than his, marked by years of juggling and lute playing rather than sword work. But in this moment it offers something more valuable than strength, understanding. He doesn't pull away. Instead, his fingers curl slightly, accepting the comfort you offer. In the dying firelight, king and fool sit together, two men who have learned that the deepest truths are often found in silence. You know, he says after a while, his voice growing drowsy with wine and weariness. When I was a boy, I had a nursemaid who would sit with me like this when I couldn't sleep. After my father died and the crown passed to me, I thought I'd lost that forever. The simple comfort of someone just being there. But you've given it back to me in your way. The compliment sits between you like a bridge, connecting the isolated king to the rootless fool. Two men who exist at the edges of normal life for very different reasons. You think of all the roles you've played over the years. Entertainer, observer, confidant, lightning rod for tension, mirror for uncomfortable truths. But perhaps this is the most important one. Companion to loneliness, guardian of the quiet hours when masks can be set aside. Sometimes I think, the king continues, his eyes growing heavy, that you're the only person in this castle who sees me as I truly am. Not as a king or a lord or a symbol, but just as a man, who gets tired and worried and afraid like anyone else. He says nothing more, and you ask nothing. You simply sit with him as the fire dies down to embers, watching the shadows lengthen and deepen. His breathing grows slower, more rhythmic, and you know he's drifting toward sleep in his chair. You should wake him, suggest he retire to his proper bed, but you don't. Sometimes the greatest service you can offer is to share the quiet, to be present in the spaces between words, to offer the gift of understanding without explanation. The castle settles into its deepest quiet around you. The night watch calls the hour from the towers, their voices distant and dreamlike. A cool breeze whispers through the high windows, stirring the rushes on the floor and making the dying fire flicker one last time before fading to mere embers. And still you sit, the jester and the king, keeper and kept, watching over each other in the gentle darkness as the night draws toward its close. You remember a visitor to the court, another lord's fool, but he was not like you. He was what they called a natural fool, and his humor was not of wit, but of pure, simple honesty. And in his presence, you understood that there are many ways to bring light into the world. It was spring when Lord Aldrich came to visit, bringing with him his household and his own court jester. You had been curious, naturally. It was rare to meet another who shared your peculiar profession. But when you first saw Thomas, you realized immediately that while you both wore the title of fool, your paths to that role had been very different indeed. Thomas was a man of perhaps 30 years, though it was difficult to tell. His face held a kind of eternal youthfulness, unmarked by the careful calculations and constant observations that had etched themselves into your own features over the years. Where your eyes were always watching, always measuring the mood of the room, his were clear and open, like pools of still water that reflected the world without trying to understand it. He was dressed simply, not in the elaborate motley that marked your station, but in clean, well-mended clothes of soft brown wool. Around his neck hung a small wooden cross, worn smooth by his fingers, and in his hand he carried not a merit or juggling balls, but a simple straw doll that he would hold and speak to as if it were his dearest friend. Lord Aldrich had found Thomas as a child, abandoned by parents who could not care for him. Rather than cast him out, the Lord had taken him in, recognizing something precious in the boy's innocent nature. God touches some souls differently, Lord Aldrich had explained to your king during that first evening's feast. Thomas sees the world with eyes unclouded by guile or ambition. In his simplicity, there is a kind of wisdom that humbles us all. You watched Thomas during that first meal, fascinated by the difference in how he moved through the world. Where you carefully measured each jest, each word, each gesture, Thomas simply was. When someone spoke kindly to him, his face lit up with genuine joy. When he was confused by something, he asked questions with the straightforward curiosity of a child, without shame or pretense. "Why do you wear so many colors?" he asked you during a quiet moment, reaching out to touch the fabric of your motley with wondering fingers. "Are you a rainbow?" The question was so innocent, so free of any hidden meaning, that you found yourself smiling in a way you hadn't in years. Not the practiced smile of performance, but something real and unguarded. "I suppose I am, in a way," you told him. "A rainbow that walks and talks and tells jokes." He clapped his hands together with delight, as if this were the most wonderful thing he had ever heard. "I like rainbows," he said simply. "They make me happy." Throughout his visit, you found yourself drawn to Thomas like a moth to a gentle flame. His laughter was pure music, not the calculated response to a well-crafted jest, but the spontaneous overflow of a heart that found joy in the smallest things. When a butterfly landed on his hand during a walk in the garden, he stood perfectly still for nearly an hour, whispering to it in soft tones, his face radiant with wonder. "Look," he said to you, barely breathing the words. "It chose me. Out of all the flowers, it chose to rest on me." You stood beside him in the dappled sunlight, watching this simple miracle through his eyes, and felt something shift in your chest. When had you last felt such uncomplicated joy? When had you last seen the world as Thomas saw it, full of small wonders and unexpected gifts? His humor, when it came, was never intentional. He would make observations so innocent and direct that they revealed truths the rest of you had been dancing around for years. During one evening's entertainment, when a visiting lord was boasting loudly about his military victories, Thomas turned to him with genuine curiosity. "If you won all those battles," he asked, "why do you look so sad when you tell us about them?" The hall fell silent. The visiting lord's face went through several colors before settling on red. But Thomas wasn't trying to mock or deflate. He was simply noting what he saw with the clarity of someone who couldn't dissemble if he tried. His question hung in the air like a bell that had been struck, resonating with a truth that made everyone uncomfortable and somehow lighter at the same time. Later, as the evening wound down, you found Thomas sitting by the fire, humming softly to his straw doll. You settled beside him, drawn by the peace that seemed to radiate from his presence like warmth from the flames. "Thomas," you said gently, "do you know that you're a fool?" He looked at you with those clear, untroubled eyes. "Lord Aldrich says so," he replied matter-of-factly. "He says I'm his special fool, and that God made me this way for a reason. He says I help people remember how to be kind. And what do you think about that?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think," he said slowly, "that if being a fool means making people smile and helping them remember that there are good things in the world, then I'm happy to be a fool. It's better than being sad all the time, like some people are." His words settled into your heart like seeds in fertile ground. Here was someone who had never questioned his place in the world, never calculated the cost of his honesty, never worn a mask to protect himself from the sharp edges of court life. His very existence was a kind of gentle rebellion against the complexity and calculation that ruled your world. On his last evening at court, Thomas sought you out as you sat in your usual corner, observing the feast from the shadows. He approached with his characteristic directness, settling beside you with the easy familiarity of someone who had never learned to fear rejection. "I'm glad I met you," he said simply. "You're very clever, and you make people laugh in ways I can't. But sometimes you look lonely." The observation hit you like a soft blow to the chest. In all your years of watching others, of reading their moods and needs, you had forgotten that you, too, might be observed, might be seen. "Are you lonely, Thomas?" you asked. He considered this with the same serious attention he gave to all questions. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that God is always with me, and Lord Aldrich is kind to me, and there are butterflies and birds and flowers and good food and warm fires and people who smile when they see me." so the loneliness doesn't stay very long. When Thomas and his lord departed the next morning, you watched from the castle walls as their party disappeared into the distance. You felt something like loss, but also something like gratitude. In his brief presence, Thomas had reminded you of truths you had forgotten in your careful navigation of court life. His presence was a soft reminder that not all fools were meant to be clever. Some were simply meant to be true, to reflect back to the world its capacity for kindness, to serve as living reminders that innocence and joy could survive even in the harsh realities of medieval life. In their simplicity, they offered a different kind of wisdom. Not the sharp insights that came from observation and wit, but the gentle truths that emerged from a heart unclouded by pretense. As you returned to your duties, you carried with you the memory of Thomas's clear laughter, his wonder at small things, his gift for seeing goodness where others saw only complexity. And you understood that in the great tapestry of court life, there was room for many kinds of wisdom, many ways of bringing light into the shadows. The mood in the castle has changed. There is a new sound now, the sound of steel being sharpened. War is coming, and your job is not to fight it, but to soothe its shadow, to be a gentle flame in the growing darkness, a keeper of peace in a place preparing for violence. You wake to the ring of hammers on metal, a rhythm that has replaced the usual morning sounds of the castle. The blacksmith's forge burns day and night now, sending sparks into the dawn sky like angry stars. The air tastes different, sharper, charged with tension and the acrid smell of heated iron. Even the stones of the castle seem to hold their breath, waiting. The great courtyard bustles with activity that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. Knights check and recheck their armor, the metal catching the morning light in flashes of silver. Squires run between them like busy ants, carrying pieces of gear, buckets of water, bundles of arrows that bristle like deadly wheat. The horses stamp and snort in their stalls, sensing the change in their riders' moods, their usual calm disturbed by the scent of preparation and fear. You make your way through this controlled chaos like a colorful ghost, your motley a splash of brightness against the gray metal and serious faces. But your role has shifted, subtle as the change from summer to autumn. You are no longer the entertainer seeking laughter for its own sake. Now you are something more essential, a reminder that joy still exists, that there are things worth protecting beyond the castle walls. In the armory, you find Sir Edmund struggling with a stubborn buckle on his breastplate. His young face is pale beneath his beard, and his hands shake slightly as he works. This will be his first real battle, you realize, and the knowledge sits on his shoulders like a lead cloak. Sir Edmund, you say softly, approaching with careful steps. That buckle has always been contrary. May I? He nods gratefully, and you work the leather through the metal with practiced fingers. Your hands, so used to juggling and music making, prove surprisingly adept at the practical task. As you work, you speak quietly, not of war or glory, but of small, comforting things. My grandmother used to say that leather, like people, becomes more stubborn when it's frightened, you murmur, coaxing the strap through. The trick is to be patient with it, to let it know you're not its enemy. The buckle slides home with a soft click, and Sir Edmund's armor settles properly across his chest. He looks down at you with something like wonder, as if you've performed magic rather than simply helping with a recalcitrant strap. Thank you, he says, and in those two words you hear not just gratitude for the practical help, but for the moment of normalcy, the brief respite from the weight of what's coming. You move on through the castle, a gentle presence in the storm of preparation. In the great hall, the ladies work with quiet intensity, not on their usual embroidery, but on practical things, bandages, ointments, provisions for the journey. The queen sits among them, her royal hands no different from any other woman's when it comes to the work of caring for those who might be wounded. You settle near them, pulling out your lute. But instead of a song, you begin to play something soft and wordless, a melody that seems to flow like water over stones. The music doesn't interrupt their work, but accompanies it, giving rhythm to their careful stitching, peace to their worried hearts. Young Lady Margaret looks up from her sewing, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Her betrothed rides with the king's army, and fear sits in her chest like a cold stone. Without words, you shift your melody to something she sang as a child, a lullaby her nurse used to hum. Recognition flickers across her face, and for a moment she is not a woman watching her love ride to war, but a little girl safe in her nursery, surrounded by gentle voices and candlelight. The days pass in this strange rhythm of preparation and waiting. The castle fills with the sound of sharpening steel and nervous horses, but also with your quiet presence, weaving between the warriors and their families like a thread of silver through dark cloth. You tell stories to the pages who are too young to fight, but old enough to understand fear. You share riddles with the men at arms, simple word puzzles that give their minds something to grip besides worry. One evening, as the sun sets red over the battlements like a portent, you find yourself in the chapel. It's unusual for you to seek out this sacred space, but tonight the stone walls and colored light filtering through stained glass offer something you need. A sense of peace that transcends the mortal concerns swirling through the castle. You're not alone. The king kneels before the altar, his crown set aside, his head bowed in prayer. Beside him, his son, the young prince who will lead his first charge in the coming battle, mirrors his father's posture. In the candlelight, they look less like rulers and more like what they truly are, a father and son facing the possibility that they might never see each other again. You don't disturb them, but you don't leave either. Instead, you settle quietly in the shadows, a guardian of their vulnerability, a keeper of this moment of shared humanity. When they finally rise and turn to leave, the king's eyes meet yours across the dim space. No words pass between you, but understanding does. You nod once, accepting the unspoken trust he places in you. The morning of departure dawns gray and cool, with mist rising from the river like the ghosts of ancient battles. The courtyard fills with the sounds of final preparations. Horses snorting and stamping, the creak of leather, the quiet murmur of last words between husbands and wives, fathers and sons. You stand at the edge of it all, your bright clothing a beacon of color in the somber scene. As the knights mount their horses and form their ranks, you move among them one last time, offering not jests or riddles, but simple blessings disguised as everyday words. May your sword stay sharp and your aim stay true, you tell one. May you find good water and dry ground for sleeping, you say to another. May you remember the taste of home bread when you're hungry, you whisper to a third. These are not the formal blessings of priests or the grand speeches of commanders, but the quiet wishes of someone who has watched these men eat and laugh and worry, who has learned to care for them in the small, daily ways that make a castle feel like home. As the knights ride out through the great gates, you do not watch them go. You turn back to the hall where the queen and the children are waiting. Your work is here now, among those who remain, those who must wait and hope and keep the home fires burning against the soldiers' return. The castle feels different with so many gone, quieter, emptier, like a song with half its notes missing. But it is not a sad quiet, not entirely. It is the quiet of people drawing together, of communities that understand their strength comes not from walls or weapons, but from the bonds between them, the shared determination to preserve what matters most. And you, the king's fool, become something new in this changed world. Not just an entertainer, but a keeper of spirits, a tender of hope, a gentle guardian of all the small, precious things that make life worth defending. In the great game of war and politics, you play perhaps the most important role of all. You remind everyone what they're fighting for. The winter chill has found its way into your bones. A fever has taken you, and for the first time in a long time, you cannot leave your room. The castle feels a world away, and in your weakness, you discover just how fragile your place in this stone fortress truly is. It begins, as these things often do, with something small and seemingly harmless. A scratchy throat one morning, a slight ache in your joints that you attribute to the damp stone floors and the approaching winter. You felt such things before, the body's small complaints that come with changing seasons and the passage of years. You take a cup of warm wine with honey, wrap your cloak a little tighter, and continue with your duties. But this is different. By evening, the scratch has become a burn, and the ache has spread through your limbs like water soaking into cloth. You find yourself stumbling during what should have been a simple juggling display, your usually steady hands betraying you. The colored balls fall to the rushes with soft thuds, and for a moment the hall falls silent. Not the comfortable quiet that sometimes follows a good jest, but the awkward hush of people witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. "Are you quite well, fool?" the queen asks, her voice carrying the particular tone of someone who already knows the answer but hopes to be proven wrong. You manage a weak smile, gathering up your juggling balls with hands that shake more than they should. "Just a bit tired, my lady. Nothing that a good night's rest won't cure." But even as you speak the words, you know they're not true. The fever is building behind your eyes like storm clouds on the horizon, and your skin feels both hot and cold at the same time, as if you can't decide whether to shiver or sweat. You excuse yourself early that evening, a rare occurrence that draws curious glances from the other castle folk. In your small chamber, you collapse onto your narrow cot without even removing your motley, too weak to manage the ties and fastenings that suddenly seem as complex as a knight's full armor. The night passes in a haze of fevered dreams and restless turning. You drift in and out of sleep, sometimes thinking you're a child again in your mother's cottage, sometimes believing you're performing for a hall full of faceless nobles who laugh without making any sound. The boundaries between memory and delirium blur like watercolors in the rain. When morning comes, it brings no relief. If anything, the fever has strengthened its grip, turning your small room into a furnace despite the winter cold that creeps through the stone walls. You try to rise, to dress, to resume your duties, but your legs betray you, and you sink back onto the cot with a weakness that frightens you more than the fever itself. For the first time in all your years at the castle, you cannot be the king's fool. You cannot be anything but a sick man in a small room, invisible to the great machine of court life that continues without you. Hours pass, or perhaps days. Time becomes fluid when fever holds you in its grip. You drift in and out of consciousness, sometimes aware of the distant sounds of the castle going about its business. The ring of the morning bell, the clatter of dishes from the kitchens below, the voices of servants in the corridors. But these sounds reach you as if from across a great distance, muffled by the strange cotton-wool world that fever weaves around its victims. You begin to understand, in your delirium, how truly alone you are. A knight who falls ill has his squire to tend him, his brothers in arms to visit. A lord has his family, his retainers, an entire household devoted to his care. Even the lowliest kitchen maid has other servants who will notice her absence, friends who will bring her soup and sit by her bedside. But you are singular, unique in your isolation. You belong everywhere and nowhere, welcome at every table but truly at home at none. The king values your service, but he has pressing matters of state that cannot wait for a fool's recovery. The queen enjoys your gentle presence, but she has her own circle of ladies, her own concerns. You are loved in a way, but at a distance, appreciated for what you provide rather than cherished for who you are. On what you think might be the second day, though it could be the third, you hear soft footsteps outside your door. For a moment, hope flickers in your chest like a candle flame. Perhaps someone has noticed your absence, perhaps help has come. But the footsteps continue past without pausing, and you sink back into your fevered solitude. It is Martha who finds you, finally. Martha the laundress, a woman of perhaps 50 years whose hands are permanently stained red from the lye soap she uses to clean the castle's linens. She comes to collect your motley for washing. It's been too long since you brought it to her, and she's noticed. She pushes open your door without ceremony, already speaking as she enters. "Master Fool, you can't keep wearing those clothes without." She stops mid-sentence when she sees you, huddled on your cot, shivering despite the flush of fever on your cheeks. "Lord have mercy," she breathes, crossing herself. In an instant, she's at your side, her work-roughened hand cool against your burning forehead. "How long have you been like this?" You try to answer, but your voice comes out as barely a whisper, cracked and dry as autumn leaves. She doesn't wait for a response anyway, already moving with the brisk efficiency of someone who has tended to illness before. who understands that sometimes the body needs care more than answers. "Don't you try to talk," she says firmly, bustling about your small room. "Save your strength. We need to get some water into you, and some proper food." Over the following days, for Martha keeps careful count where you have lost track, she becomes your anchor to the world of the living. She brings you thin broth and weak ale, coaxing you to take small sips even when your stomach rebels. She changes the straw in your mattress when the fever sweats have soaked it through. She sits by your bedside in the evenings after her own work is done, not speaking much, but providing the simple comfort of human presence. Why? You ask her one evening when the fever has broken enough for you to form complete sentences. Why do you care for me? You have your own work, your own concerns. Martha looks up from her mending. She's repairing a small tear in your motley, her needle moving with the same careful precision she brings to everything. "Because," she says simply, "when my youngest boy took sick 3 winters past, you sat with him one afternoon. You didn't tell jokes or try to entertain him. You just sat there while he slept, making sure he wasn't alone. He remembered that, talked about it for months after. The kind fool, he called you. The memory comes back to you slowly, hazily. A small boy with Martha's dark eyes, burning with fever much like your own, lying in the servants' quarters while his mother worked. You had wandered down there for some reason you can't recall now, and seeing him so small and still in his bed, you had simply stayed. It had seemed like nothing at the time, just a few hours spent in quiet companionship. Kindness, Martha continues, her voice soft in the dim light of your chamber, isn't something you keep account of. It's something you pass along, like a flame from one candle to another. You gave some to my boy when he needed it. Now I give some to you. As you slowly mend, strength returning to your limbs like water filling a dry well, you realize something profound about your place in the castle's ecosystem. You may not have blood family or sworn brothers, but you have created something else. A web of small connections, tiny debts of kindness given and received. The page you taught a simple trick remembers and slips you an extra portion of bread. The serving girl you made laugh during a particularly difficult evening makes sure your water pitcher is always full. As you slowly mend, strength returning to your limbs like water filling a dry well, you realize something profound about your place in the castle's ecosystem. You may not have blood family or sworn brothers, but you have created something else, a web of small connections, tiny debts of kindness given and received. When you finally emerge from your chamber, pale and thinner but alive, the castle feels different to you. Or perhaps you feel different in it. You understand now, in a way you never did before, how precarious your position truly is, how dependent you are on the goodwill of others. But you also understand something else, that the small kindnesses you've scattered like seeds over the years have taken root, creating a garden of care that bloomed when you needed it most. You are still the king's fool, still the entertainer and observer and keeper of secrets. But you are also something more fragile and more precious. A human being who has learned that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from wit or observation, but from the simple recognition that we all, in our different ways, need tending. The fever has passed, but its lesson remains, settling into your bones more permanently than any chill. In a world where power and position can shift like sand, the connections we forge through simple human kindness are often the only things that endure. The years have passed quietly, like pages turning in a book. Your hair is grayer now, your steps a little slower. The riddles you tell are old friends, worn smooth by countless tellings, but still reliable in their gentle humor. You catch your reflection sometimes in the polished silver of a serving tray, and marvel at how time has drawn its soft lines across your face. The bells on your cap still jingle, but with a mellower tone, as if they too have learned the virtue of restraint that comes with age. This morning, you rise from your narrow bed with the careful deliberation of someone whose bones remember every winter the castle has seen. Your motley hangs on its wooden peg, as colorful as ever, though you notice how your hands have grown more deliberate in their movements as you dress. The party-colored fabric, half red, half blue, with touches of yellow at the sleeves, still fits, though perhaps a little looser now around your shoulders. Your soft leather shoes, curled at the toes in the traditional manner, slip on easily. They are old friends now, molded perfectly to your feet after decades of padding silently through stone corridors. You make your way through the castle with the unhurried pace of someone who has walked these halls for so many years that each stone is familiar. The servants nod to you with the easy familiarity of shared history. Young Margaret, who once hid behind her mother's skirts when you performed your juggling tricks, now runs the kitchen with efficient authority. She always saves you a warm honey cake from the morning baking, a small kindness that has become as regular as sunrise. In the great hall, you find your usual spot near the great hearth. The massive stone fireplace has been your companion through countless mornings, its warmth a constant comfort against the castle's perpetual chill. You settle onto your low stool, the same one the castle's carpenter made for you 20 years ago, worn smooth now by use, and survey the familiar scene unfolding before you. The young Lord William, barely past his 20th year, sits where his father once held court. You remember when William was nothing more than a gap-toothed boy who would clap with delight at your simplest tricks. Now he wears the weight of leadership with the earnest gravity of youth, his brow furrowed as he listens to a dispute between two tenant farmers about a boundary line that has been contested for generations. You watch him with the fond patience of someone who has seen this story play out many times before. His father sat in that same chair, with that same earnest expression, hearing variations of the same complaints. His grandfather before him did likewise. The names change, the faces grow older and are replaced by younger ones, but the essential rhythms of castle life continue like the steady beating of a great heart. Lady Eleanor sits to William's right, her needlework forgotten in her lap as she watches her son navigate his duties. You have served 3 generations of this family now, and you can see his father's determination in the set of William's jaw, his grandfather's thoughtfulness in the way he pauses before speaking. Eleanor catches your eye and shares the smallest of smiles, the knowing look of someone who has also watched the wheel of time turn through its endless cycle. The morning light streams through the tall windows, casting familiar patterns on the rush-covered floor. You have watched these same shafts of sunlight travel across the stones for decades, marking the hours with their slow dance. How many thousands of mornings have you spent in this hall? How many jokes have you told? How many riddles posed? How many moments of tension have you gently dissolved with well-timed humor? A young page approaches you nervously. He cannot be more than 12, with the awkward limbs and earnest face of boyhood. In his hands, he carries a small wooden horse, crudely carved but painted with bright colors. "Master Fool," he whispers, using the formal address that still makes you smile after all these years. Could you make this horse talk? Like you did with Sir Edmund's sword yesterday?" You take the little toy with careful hands, feeling its weight, examining the simple craftsmanship with the attention it deserves. The boy who carved this horse, perhaps the page himself, or a younger brother, put love into its making. The proportions are not quite right, and the paint is slightly smeared, but it has the honest charm that only comes from work done with care rather than skill. "Ah," you say, your voice carrying just far enough for the boy to hear, but not so far as to disturb the court's business. "This is a very special horse indeed. See how he holds his head. That is the posture of a steed who has many stories to tell." You cradle the toy against your ear, nodding sagely as though listening to whispered secrets. "He tells me he once belonged to a great knight who rode to the very edge of the world, where the sky meets the sea." The boy's eyes widen with delight, and you continue the gentle fiction, weaving a quiet tale of the wooden horse's adventures. It is a simple pleasure, this ability to transform an ordinary moment into something magical with nothing more than words and imagination. As you speak, you are aware of Lady Eleanor's approving glance, of the way even Lord William's attention drifts occasionally toward your quiet performance. When the tale is finished and the page has scampered away, clutching his now enchanted horse, you settle back onto your stool with a satisfaction that has only deepened with age. This is what you do now. Not the grand performances of your younger days, but these smaller, more intimate moments of wonder. Your humor has grown gentler, your jokes more subtle, your riddles designed not to challenge but to comfort. You watch the young nobles, the children you once entertained, now with children of their own. Lady Catherine, who used to beg you for just one more story before bedtime, now watches her own daughter with the same indulgent patience her mother once showed her. Young Sir Thomas, who spent his boyhood trying to guess the answers to your riddles, now poses gentle puzzles to his own son, unconsciously echoing the cadences he learned from listening to you. There is a bittersweetness to this recognition, not sadness exactly, but a gentle melancholy like the last light of autumn. You are watching the world you helped shape continue without you at its center. The stories you told, the laughter you sparked, the moments of joy you created, they have taken root and grown into new stories, new laughter, new joy. It is a kind of immortality, you suppose, this ripple effect of small kindnesses and shared moments of wonder. The fire crackles in the hearth, sending up sparks that dance briefly in the chimney's darkness before disappearing. You know that feeling well, the bright moment of performance, the brief illumination, and then the gentle fading into memory. But the warmth remains, long after the spark is gone. The stones of the hearth hold heat through the night, just as the hearts of those you have entertained hold the warmth of laughter through the years. A young woman enters the hall, someone you do not recognize, though she wears the colors of a visiting lord's household. She looks around with a wide-eyed wonder of someone seeing a great castle for the first time, taking in the tapestries, the high vaulted ceiling, the ancient shields that hang along the walls. Her gaze falls on you, sitting quietly by the fire in your colorful motley, and she smiles uncertainly, unsure of your place in this grand hierarchy. You offer her a gentle nod and a welcoming smile. Once, you might have launched into an elaborate greeting, perhaps a riddle or a jest to break the ice of unfamiliarity. Now, you simply acknowledge her presence with the quiet dignity that age has taught you. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can offer is not entertainment, but simply the recognition that everyone deserves to be seen and welcomed. Your time as the king's fool, is drawing to a gentle close. Not ending with drama or dismissal, but fading like daylight into dusk, so gradually that you cannot pinpoint the exact moment when day becomes night. Young Lord William has not said anything, and perhaps he will not need to. You can feel the natural rhythm of things, the way a storyteller knows when a tale is nearing its end. But that ending, whenever it comes, holds no fear for you. You have lived a life of purpose, bringing light to dark moments, laughter to heavy hearts, wonder to ordinary days. The bells on your cap will fall silent eventually, but the echoes of the joy you have created will continue to resonate through these stone halls long after you are gone. For now, though, you are content to sit by the fire, watching the familiar dance of castle life unfold around you, ready to offer a gentle word or a quiet smile whenever they are needed. The afternoon is young, and there is still time for one more story, one more moment of magic, one more small act of kindness in a world that needs all the gentleness it can find. One day, the king calls you to his side, not in the great hall, but in the quiet of his garden. He tells you your service is done, and that you may rest. The morning is soft with early spring when Lord William finds you in your usual place by the hearth. But today, something in his manner is different, gentler, more formal, touched with the weight of ceremony. He does not summon you with the casual gesture you have known for decades. Instead, he approaches your stool with the measured steps of someone carrying important words. "My dear friend," he says, and the formality of address catches your attention immediately. Not fool, not even master fool, but friend. A word that acknowledges all the years, all the shared moments, all the quiet wisdom you have offered alongside your gentle humor. "Would you walk with me in the garden? There is something I wish to discuss with you." You rise from your stool with the careful dignity that has become second nature, your bells giving their familiar mellow chime. The spring air is soft against your face as you follow Lord William through the postern gate and into his private garden, a place of peace he has cultivated behind the castle's main walls. Apple trees are just beginning to show their first pale blossoms, and the herb beds are green with new growth. The garden smells of turned earth and possibility, of endings that are also beginnings. Lord William leads you to a simple wooden bench beneath an old pear tree, its gnarled branches heavy with the promise of fruit to come. The bench is worn smooth by weather and time, much like yourself, you think with gentle amusement. He settles beside you, not with the formal distance of rank, but with the comfortable ease of long friendship. For a moment, neither of you speaks. The silence is not awkward, but companionable, the kind of quiet that exists between people who have shared much and need not fill every moment with words. A robin lands nearby, pecking industriously at the soft earth, completely unafraid of your presence. The everyday miracle of a bird going about its business seems to capture something essential about this moment. The simple continuation of life in all its forms. You have served my family well, Lord William begins, his voice carrying the weight of gratitude earned over decades. You entertained my grandfather when I was barely old enough to toddle. You helped raise me with your stories and riddles, taught me to find joy even in the darkest winter days. You have been companion to 3 generations of our house. You nod quietly, understanding that this is both praise and farewell, both recognition and release. The words you might have spoken in response, protestations of unworthiness, or jokes to deflect the solemnity of the moment, seem unnecessary now. This is not a time for performance, but for simple truth. I know you feel the weight of years, he continues, and I would not have you carry that burden while still trying to lighten ours. Your service to us is complete, not because you have failed in any way, but because you have succeeded beyond measure. You have earned the right to rest. He reaches into his doublet and withdraws a small leather purse, heavy with coin and a rolled parchment sealed with his personal seal. There is a cottage, he explains, just beyond the village, where the road bends toward the mill. It belonged to my grandfather's old huntsman, but it has stood empty these past 2 years. It is yours now, with land enough for a small garden and an apple tree that bears the sweetest fruit in the county. The purse contains enough silver to keep you comfortable for as long as you may live. You take the parchment with hands that shake only slightly, not from infirmity, but from the magnitude of this unexpected kindness. A home of your own. After decades of living in borrowed space, sleeping in a chamber that belonged to your office rather than yourself, you are being given something that will be truly yours. There is no shame in this retirement, Lord William says gently, perhaps sensing your wonder. Great knights hang up their swords when age makes them too heavy to wield. Wise counselors step back when their minds grow tired of the weight of decisions. You, who have given us laughter and wisdom, deserve the peace that comes with a job well done. The cottage, when you see it 3 days later, is perfect in its simplicity. Built of warm, honey-colored stone with a thatched roof that speaks of cozy winters, it sits in a small clearing surrounded by hazel trees. The apple tree Lord William mentioned spreads its branches protectively over the front garden, and there is a well nearby with the sweetest water you have ever tasted. Inside, the rooms are small but comfortable. A main room with a fireplace, a small chamber for sleeping, and a tiny kitchen with shelves for storing provisions. For the first time in your adult life, you remove your motley and fold it carefully away in an old wooden chest. The bright colors seem almost foreign now, like costumes from a play you once acted in but have since finished. In their place, you don simple brown wool, the clothes of a common man, free from the burden of performance. The silence is the most remarkable thing. After decades of bells announcing your every movement, the absolute quiet of your steps takes some getting used to. You walk through your cottage and tiny garden without accompaniment save for the natural sounds of the countryside, birdsong, the whisper of wind through leaves, the distant lowing of cattle in the village fields. Your days settle into a rhythm as gentle as breathing. You wake when the light filtering through your small windows tells you it is time, not because a castle's schedule demands it. You tend your garden, learning the names of plants you once only saw prepared for the Lord's table. You discover the satisfaction of coaxing carrots from the earth, of watching beans climb their wooden stakes, of harvesting herbs that make even the simplest meal feel like a feast. The villagers, at first uncertain how to treat the retired fool, gradually accept you as simply another neighbor. The baker's wife brings you fresh bread in exchange for help mending her garden gate. The miller's children sometimes stop by, drawn by stories that you still know how to tell, though now you tell them for their own sake, not as part of any performance. On market days, you walk into the village, your steps slow but steady. You buy what you need and exchange pleasantries with people who see you not as the king's fool, but simply as the quiet man who lives in the cottage by the mill road. There is a profound peace in this anonymity, in being valued not for your ability to entertain, but simply for your presence as a fellow human being navigating the ordinary business of life. Sometimes, on clear days, you can see the castle in the distance, its towers rising above the trees like familiar old friends. You feel no sadness at the sight, no longing to return to your former role. Instead, you feel the satisfaction of a story well told, a song sung to its natural conclusion, a dance that has reached its graceful final bow. In your small garden, you plant a rose bush, not because roses serve any practical purpose, but simply because they are beautiful. As you pat the soil around its roots, you realize this is perhaps the first thing in your entire adult life that you have done purely for the joy of it, with no thought of how it might entertain or please another. The seasons turn with their ancient rhythm. Your first winter in the cottage is a revelation of comfort. Your own fire in your own hearth, your own bed in your own chamber, the luxury of solitude when you crave it, and the warmth of village friendship when you need company. You read books borrowed from the village priest, books you never had time for when your days were spent crafting entertainment for others. Spring returns, and with it the apple blossoms on your tree. You sit beneath them on a bench you have made with your own hands, simple work, but honest, and watch the petals drift down like gentle snow. A lifetime of bringing joy to others has prepared you well for finding joy in small things. The taste of an apple from your own tree, the sight of your roses blooming against the cottage wall, the sound of rain on your thatched roof. And so your story ends, not with a grand finale, but with the quiet closing of a door, the soft sigh of a man who spent his life making others laugh, and has finally found his own peace. The bells that once announced your presence have fallen silent, but the echoes of the laughter you created continue to ripple through the world like stones cast into still water. In the castle, new entertainers come and go, each bringing their own gifts to the ancient task of lifting spirits and lightening hearts. But in quiet moments, when the fire burns low and the wind whispers through the stones, they say you can still hear the gentle ghost of laughter that belongs to no one and everyone, the sound of joy that has become part of the very walls themselves. And in your cottage by the mill road, surrounded by the simple abundance of a life well lived, you rest at last. Your sleep is deep and dreamless, filled with the profound satisfaction that comes to those who have used their gifts not for their own glory, but in service to the happiness of others. The last laugh, it turns out, belongs not to any jest or riddle, but to the quiet contentment of a story that has found its perfect, peaceful ending. And now, our time in the strange and gentle world of the medieval jester comes to a close. We've walked in his soft-soled shoes through the stone corridors of history, felt the weight of his colorful motley, and understood the delicate balance of his extraordinary life. We've seen that his world was not always one of bright laughter and grand performances, but of quiet observation, gentle wit, and a profound, and often lonely kind of wisdom. Together, we've discovered that the court jester was far more than a simple entertainer. He was a keeper of secrets, a mirror held up to power, a bridge between the mighty and the humble. He lived in the spaces between, neither fully servant nor master, neither completely inside the world of privilege nor entirely outside it. His greatest skill was not juggling or riddling, but the delicate art of speaking truth wrapped in humor, of offering comfort disguised as jest. We've witnessed his daily rhythms, the careful donning of his bells and motley each morning, the quiet observation from his corner by the fire, the gentle navigation of court politics with nothing but wit as his shield. We felt the weight of his responsibility, to lighten heavy hearts, to diffuse dangerous tensions, to bring moments of pure joy into lives constrained by duty and hierarchy. We've understood his precarious position, how a joke that landed wrong could mean exile or worse, how his security depended entirely on his ability to read the room, to gauge the mood, to know exactly when levity was welcome and when silence was golden. Yet we've also seen his unique privileges, dining at the high table, speaking freely to kings and queens, being trusted with confidences that no one else could hear. Most beautifully, we've followed him through the full arc of a life well lived, from the nervous energy of youth, through the confident mastery of his middle years, to the gentle wisdom of age. We've seen how his humor evolved from sharp wit to gentle kindness, how his role transformed from entertainer to confidant to quiet presence. And finally, we've witnessed his graceful retirement to a simple cottage, where the bells fell silent, but the echoes of joy continued to ripple outward like circles on still water. As your mind continues to float in that drowsy space between waking and sleeping, you can let these images drift away like smoke from a dying candle. The gray stone walls of the medieval castle growing dim in memory. The flicker of torchlight fading to gentle darkness. The sound of a single, distant bell becoming quieter and quieter until it merges with the whisper of your own breath. You don't need to hold on to any of these details now. The story has been told, complete and whole. The jester has found his peace in his cottage garden, surrounded by apple blossoms and the simple satisfaction of a life that brought joy to others. His laughter has become part of the very stones of the castle, woven into the fabric of all the lives he touched. This is how the best stories end, not with dramatic flourishes, but with quiet contentment and the knowledge that something beautiful has been shared. Let his final piece become your peace now. Feel how your own body has grown heavy and relaxed during our journey together, how your breathing has slowed to match the gentle rhythm of the story, how your mind has released the concerns of the day and embraced this ancient tale of wisdom and wonder. There is nothing left to do now except rest. Allow the darkness to wrap around you like the jester's woolen blanket, warm and comforting and safe. Let your thoughts drift away like apple petals on a spring breeze. There is only stillness here, only the soft, easy rhythm of sleep approaching on quiet feet. Only the profound peace that comes at the end of every good story, when all the words have been spoken and silence reclaims its gentle dominion. The bells have fallen silent. The motley has been folded away. The jester sleeps peacefully in his cottage, and now it is time for you to sleep as well. Rest well, dear listener. Rest well.